The Galactic Confederation's elite military academy was a place of precision and discipline, where recruits from across the stars were shaped into warriors capable of defending the fragile peace of the cosmos. Species of every imaginable physiology and culture converged here, each bringing their own unique strengths and weaknesses. Telepathic strategists from the Sci-Fi, their gelatinous bodies shimmering as their tendrils pulsed with thought, trained alongside the hulking Korgan warriors, their reptilian scales glinting under the Academy's artificial sunlight. This was the galaxy's crucible of excellence, where only the most exceptional were admitted. When the human recruit arrived, she didn't seem like much. Erin Thorne stepped off the transport with her usual easy smile, the wiry frame of her body hidden beneath a standard-issue jumpsuit that bore no insignia. At 5'8", she was neither towering nor intimidating. She wasn't covered in natural armor, didn't have bioluminescent tendrils, and lacked the high-tech implants that some other recruits used as extensions of their bodies. To the casual observer, she was almost disappointingly ordinary. But the drill sergeants knew better. Humans were rare among the stars, and for good reason. They hailed from Earth, a Class 5 death world, a designation that encapsulated its predatory ecosystem, volatile climate, and sheer randomness. No other species lived on a world that combined so many life-threatening variables. On Earth, danger wasn't a sporadic occurrence. It was the default state of existence. Most recruits had never even seen a human before, but the reputation of Deathworlders preceded her. Grix, the lead drill sergeant, observed Erin from a distance as she walked toward the barracks. His massive form cast a long shadow across the training field. With scales like black obsidian and a row of razor-sharp teeth, Grix was a figure that terrified even his fellow instructors. He turned to his colleague, Lyrics. Ashivi's semi-translucent body shimmered as she adjusted the fit of her armor-like exosuit. "She'll break during Hell Week," Grix growled, his voice a low rumble that carried across the command platform. "They all do, Deathworlder or not. This course is designed to push every recruit past their limits. It's science." Lyra undulated slightly, the fluid within her body rippling. "Perhaps, but humans are unpredictable. They thrive on chaos. If the stories are true..." Grix snorted, a cloud of vapor escaping his nostrils. "Stories. My scales have heard enough of them. Let's see how well she does when the gravity shifts to 3 times her planetary standard, or when the simulations toss her into a vacuum. Chaos is one thing, Hell Week is another." A fellow replied. Erin approached the starting line of the training field, clutching the data pad that displayed her assigned schedule. She glanced at the shimmering holographic text, her brow furrowing slightly. 7 days, she murmured to herself. A whole week of this. Her voice carried a tone that wasn't dread, but rather curiosity, as if she were contemplating whether this would be a test of her endurance or just another chore. Around her, other recruits were already preparing for the opening challenge, a zero-gravity combat simulation. They strapped into harnesses and exchanged nervous glances, many whispering to each other about the human recruit. Erin ignored them. When the klaxon blared, signaling the start of Hell Week, chaos erupted. The zero-gravity simulator flung recruits into a sprawling, 3-dimensional maze filled with hostile drones armed with plasma stingers. Most recruits floundered as they struggled to adapt to the lack of gravity, their movements awkward and inefficient. But Erin moved like a fish in water. She launched herself off walls with calculated precision, using her momentum to glide through the airless environment. The drones, programmed to exploit any hesitation or clumsiness, couldn't keep up. Erin's movements were too fluid, too deliberate. She evaded plasma bolts by inches, using the drone's own targeting systems against them. In less than 15 minutes, she'd dismantled all 20 opponents. The simulation ended abruptly, and the other recruits stared at her in disbelief as they were pulled from the arena, panting and bruised. Erin landed lightly on her feet, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Scowling, she faced the rest of the group with renewed fortitude. "That was fun," she said, flashing a grin at no one in particular. Word of her performance spread quickly. By the time she entered the second phase of the course, a survival simulation on a volcanic world, her name was already being whispered in hushed tones. The volcanic environment was designed to be nearly impossible to navigate. Rivers of molten lava crisscrossed the terrain, and the air was thick with sulfur and ash. Hostile creatures, crafted from the Academy's most sadistic programmers, hunted recruits relentlessly. Most recruits panicked. They scrambled for shelter or tried to outrun the predators, only to fall into traps or collapse from exhaustion. Erin, however, moved with purpose. She crouched low, studying the terrain, then picked her way carefully through the lava fields. She used the volcanic gases to mask her presence and tracked the predators instead of running from them. At one point, a towering beast with serrated claws and glowing red eyes lunged at her. Erin ducked under its swing and drove her combat knife into a vulnerable spot just below its armored exoskeleton. The creature collapsed, twitching, as she stepped over it without so much as a backward glance. She completed the challenge in record time. The third phase was supposed to be a reprieve from the physical intensity of the first two. Recruits were placed in isolated chambers and tasked with solving a series of intricate hacking puzzles. These puzzles were designed to test cognitive ability, requiring recruits to think in multiple dimensions and navigate complex alien logic systems. The average recruit took 4 hours to solve the first puzzle. Erin solved all of them in 10 minutes. By the time she reached the final phase, a simulated battlefield designed to replicate the chaos of galactic warfare, her performance metrics had already broken the Academy's records. The battlefield was an unforgiving nightmare. Drones, alien combatants, and automated artillery rained destruction from every angle. Most recruits barely survived the first 10 minutes, relying on their squad mates to cover their weaknesses. Erin didn't just survive, she dominated. She moved like a ghost, slipping through enemy lines and dismantling their defenses with ruthless efficiency. When her plasma rifle overheated, she switched to melee combat, taking down opponents twice her size with nothing more than a combat knife and sheer audacity. Her tactics were unconventional, bordering on reckless, but they worked. 45 minutes later, the simulation ended. The battlefield dissolved into a grid of holographic light, and Erin stood alone in the center, her jumpsuit stained with simulated blood. The control room erupted into chaos. Drill sergeants scrambled to analyze the data pouring in from the simulations. Metrics that were supposed to measure stress, reaction time, and endurance were off the charts. The system, designed to calibrate for dozens of species, couldn't process what it was seeing. "She's done?" Grix growled, his claws digging into the console. "She broke the course," Lyris said, her tendrils vibrating with alarm. "This isn't supposed to happen. The simulation should escalate until she fails. That's the whole point." "Did she cheat?" barked a small, rodent-like officer who'd joined the commotion. "No," Lyris replied, frantically cross-checking the data. "We monitored her every move. Every action was legitimate. She just did it." The door to the control room hissed open, and Erin strolled in, looking entirely unbothered. She still wore her jumpsuit, and though it was damp with sweat, she didn't appear winded. "Hey," she said casually, leaning against the doorway. "I think your clock's broken. The course was supposed to last a week, but I wrapped up in about an hour. So, what now?" The room fell silent. Grix turned slowly, his glowing yellow eyes narrowing as he stared at her. His voice was a low, dangerous growl. "Recruit Thorn, you've shattered every record in this Academy's history. What are you?" Erin tilted her head, pretending to think. "Human?" she said with an innocent smile. You know. From Earth, Deathworlder, it's not that big a deal. Lyrics, who'd been vibrating with suppressed anxiety, couldn't hold back any longer. It is a big deal, she exclaimed, her tendrils flailing. You're not supposed to… How did you… What do you mean, not a big deal? Aaron shrugged, the motion almost dismissive. Back home we call this Tuesday. The Tuesday solaced. The control room descended into chaos as alarms blared, signaling system errors. The simulation software, unable to process her performance, was crashing spectacularly. Grix rubbed his temples, his massive claws scraping against his scaled forehead. This is impossible. No one finishes Hell Week in an hour. No one. Guess I'm no one, Aaron quipped, her grin widening. The sergeants exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from exasperation to outright panic. For the first time in years, the Academy's instructors were at a loss. The recruit had broken their system, their expectations, and quite possibly their sanity. Aaron folded her arms, leaning casually against the console. So? What's next? The aftermath of Aaron Thorne's Hell Week victory sent shockwaves through the Academy. Whispers spread like wildfire among the recruits and instructors alike. By the end of the day, her name had become legend. Cadets from every corner of the galaxy speculated about how she had done it. Theories ranged from secret enhancements to clandestine training on Earth, though none of the explanations satisfied the mounting confusion. Meanwhile, the command staff met in the high-security conference room, its sleek metallic walls humming faintly with the quiet thrum of energy fields. The room was designed to shield its occupants from outside interference, both physical and telepathic. Here, the instructors hoped to analyze what had just transpired. Grix stood at the head of the table, his massive frame tense with frustration. Lyric sat across from him, her gelatinous form slumped into her exosuit, as if the events of the day had physically drained her. Around the table, the other sergeants and technical officers sat in a mix of astonishment and unease. Let's start from the beginning, Grix growled, his deep voice reverberating through the chamber. We have a recruit, a Deathworlder, who completed the Hell Week course in under an hour. That's not just improbable, it's impossible. I want answers. One of the tech officers, a wiry Avoxy with plumage that shifted nervously between bright yellow and dull gray, cleared his throat. We've analyzed her performance metrics in detail. There was no indication of cheating. She didn't use unauthorized equipment, nor did she manipulate the system. Everything she did was within the parameters of the simulation. Really? She broke the parameters, Ryrix interjected, her voice tinged with frustration. The system is designed to adapt dynamically. The challenges are supposed to escalate until the recruit either fails or barely succeeds. The fact that she breezed through suggests a fundamental flaw in the program. The Avaxi officer bristled, his feathers flaring briefly. With respect, the program has been used for over 2 decades without incident. It's been calibrated for hundreds of species. The problem isn't the system, it's the recruit. She didn't just outperform expectations, she exceeded what we thought was physically and mentally possible. Grix's claws tapped rhythmically against the table, a menacing sound that silenced the room. Explain, he said curtly. The Avaxi brought up a holographic display, projecting a series of graphs and video feeds. Let's break it down. In the zero-gravity combat simulation, most recruits struggle with spatial awareness and movement. Thorne demonstrated not only immediate adaptation, but also a level of tactical creativity that suggests she's been trained for this environment. Look here. The video feed showed Erin launching herself off a wall, flipping mid-air to avoid a plasma bolt, and using the recoil from her weapon to propel herself toward an enemy drone. She dismantled the drone with surgical precision, before pivoting to use its dismembered arm as a projectile weapon against another target. She improvised a weapon, Lyrics murmured, her tendrils twitching. She improvised everything, the Avoxy replied. Her entire approach was reactive and adaptive. It's as if she thrives on unpredictability. Grix narrowed his eyes. And the volcanic survival simulation? The Avoxy switched the feed, displaying Erin's journey through the molten wasteland. The footage showed her navigating treacherous lava flows with uncanny ease, her movements deliberate and efficient. She avoided the predators entirely by using natural gas plumes to obscure her scent and heat signature, a tactic no recruit had ever attempted. She's not just surviving, Grix said, his voice low. She's outthinking the simulation. The Avoxy nodded. Precisely. The system is designed to simulate overwhelming odds, yet she approaches each challenge as if it's merely an inconvenience. The room fell silent as the officers processed the implications. What about the hacking puzzle? Lyris asked, her tone skeptical. The Avoxy hesitated. That's where things become strange. The puzzles are built on multi-layered algorithms meant to replicate alien logic systems. It takes recruits hours just to understand the parameters. Thorne completed all of them in 10 minutes. No recruit has ever solved them that quickly. Not even those with cybernetic enhancements. Thorne suspected that maybe all layers have their cybernetic enhancements. Grix slammed his fist against the table, cracking the surface. Enough with the technical details. What does this mean for the Academy, for the Confederation? It means, Lyrachek said slowly, that we have no idea what humans are truly capable of. As the meeting continued, Erin lounged in the mess hall, a tray of unidentifiable alien food in front of her. The other recruits gave her a wide berth, their curiosity mingling with a healthy dose of fear. She didn't seem to notice or care. Across the room, a small group of recruits huddled together, whispering. He's not normal, muttered a tall, insectoid recruit with iridescent wings. No one finishes Hell Week in an hour. She's probably enhanced. Enhanced or not, she's dangerous, replied a stocky, fur-covered Lisan. Did you see what she did to that predator in the volcanic sim? It was like she knew exactly where to strike. Creepy. Erin glanced up, catching their stares. She smiled and waved, causing the group to scatter like startled prey. She chuckled to herself, shaking her head. Erin crawled the last few yards to his feet. He looked down at his classmates. You'd think they've never seen a human before, she muttered, stabbing her fork into a piece of gelatinous meat. A shadow fell across her table. Erin looked up to see a fellow recruit, a sleek, feline-like Zerani, standing with arms crossed. You don't seem worried about the attention, the Zerani said, her golden eyes narrowing. Well, would I be? Erin replied, taking a bite of her food. Because you've made enemies. The Zerani's voice was low, almost a purr. No one likes a recruit who makes the rest of us look incompetent. Erin smirked. That's not my problem. He waited for the side conversation to resume. The Zerani leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. It might become your problem if someone decides to make an example of you. Erin set down her fork, her expression turning serious. Is that a threat? The Zerani blinked, momentarily caught off guard. No, it's advice. Good, Erin said, leaning back in her chair. Because I'd hate to embarrass anyone else today. The Zerani studied her for a moment, then shook her head and walked away. Erin returned to her meal, but her mind wandered. She hadn't intended to cause such a stir, but she also wasn't going to apologize for being good at what she did. She'd grown up in a world where survival often depended on quick thinking and adaptability. To her, the Academy's challenges were just another version of Earth's unpredictability, a slightly more sanitized version at that. One more preparation I hold for you. See if you see all of that. Back in the control room, the instructors were still debating how to handle the situation. She's a liability, Grix growled. If the other recruits start resenting her, it could disrupt the entire training program. Exercise your temptations with things like this, Mrs. Fuller said. She's also an asset, Lurix countered. Imagine what we could learn from her. If humans are all like this. They're not, the Avaxi interrupted. Humans vary widely. Most of them wouldn't last a day in this academy. Thorn is an outlier. An outlier, Grix repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. Or a threat. Lyra sighed. She's a recruit, Grix. Our job is to train her, not fear her. Grix didn't respond, his yellow eyes fixed on the holographic feed of Aaron sitting in the mess hall. Grix didn't even smile. The meeting adjourned without a resolution. The instructors knew one thing for certain. Aaron Thorn had changed the game, and the academy would never be the same. The academy buzzed with a mix of unease and anticipation in the days following Aaron Thorn's stunning Hell Week performance. Rumors of her extraordinary feats spiraled into myth, with each retelling amplifying her already legendary status. Some claimed she could see through walls, others that she had internal implants allowing her to process time more slowly. By the third day, there were whispers that she wasn't human at all, but a Confederation experiment sent to test the academy itself. Erin didn't much care for the rumors. She had her routine: wake up early, stretch, eat, and train. The academy might have been thrown into disarray, but to her it was just another challenge to face, another system to master. Earth had taught her that if you focused on what you could control, chaos became an ally rather than a foe. What she couldn't ignore, however, were the stares. In the training yard, her fellow recruits either avoided her entirely or watched her every move. Groups that once trained together in camaraderie had become cliques, and Erin's name was rarely spoken without tension. She knew this kind of isolation. Back on Earth, it wasn't unusual for those who stood out to be singled out, whether for ridicule, resentment, or worse. Her next assignment was Advanced Tactical Simulations, a course designed to teach recruits how to lead squads in high-pressure scenarios. This wasn't an individual exercise. It required teamwork, strategy, and trust. Erin had her doubts about whether she'd get the latter two from her peers. The simulation chamber loomed ahead, a massive dome of blackened metal that gleamed under the academy's artificial sunlight. Inside, the recruits were divided into squads and given a mission: infiltrate a heavily defended enemy base, neutralize its command systems, and extract vital intelligence. The catch? Every recruit had a designated role, and success depended on how well they worked together. Erin was assigned to Squad Delta, along with 3 others. Brock, a hulking Korgan who looked like he could snap a steel bar with his claws. Tira, the Zirani who had warned Erin in the mess hall days earlier. And Mavik, a wiry, bird-like Avaxi whose nervous energy was matched only by his sharp intellect. As they gathered near the entrance to the chamber, Brack made his disdain for Erin abundantly clear. "We get stuck with her," he growled, his voice like grinding stones. "She'll try to do everything herself, just like Hell Week." Erin crossed her arms and tilted her head. "Would you prefer I let you lead?" Brack snarled, stepping closer. "I don't need a Deathworlder making me look bad." "Then don't look bad," she shot back, her tone calm but cutting. Before Brock could retort, Tira stepped between them. "Enough," she snapped, her golden eyes flashing. "This simulation isn't about proving who's the strongest. We either work together or we fail. Got it?" Brake glared at her, then at Erin, but finally grunted in reluctant agreement. Finally, she settled for looking past him. Inside the simulation chamber, the environment materialized around them, a dense alien jungle shrouded in mist, with towering trees and foliage glowing faintly in shades of blue and green. The enemy base was hidden somewhere beyond the ridge ahead, its defenses cloaked by advanced stealth technology. The squad had minimal supplies, and their mission briefing had emphasized the need for stealth and precision. Erin took the lead as they moved through the jungle, her senses on high alert. The others followed, though Brock's heavy footfalls threatened to give away their position. She paused at the edge of a clearing, motioning for the squad to stop. "There's movement up ahead," she whispered, pointing to a faint shimmer in the air that betrayed the presence of cloaked sentries. "How do you even see that?" Mavic muttered, his feathers puffing slightly in agitation. Erin didn't answer. Instead, she studied the sentries' patrol patterns, quickly identifying gaps in their formation. "We can bypass them if we move now," she said. "Follow my lead and don't make a sound." Brack bristled. "Who put you in charge?" "Nobody," Erin replied, her voice steady. "But unless you've got a better plan, I suggest you keep your claws quiet." Tira nudged Brack with her tail. "She's right. Let's move." Despite his grumbling, Brack complied. The squad followed Erin's lead, slipping through the clearing undetected. It wasn't until they reached the base's perimeter that they encountered their first real challenge, an electrified barrier surrounded by automated turrets. Mavic scanned the area, his sharp eyes darting between the barrier and a nearby control panel. "I can disable the turrets," he said, "but it'll take time." "How much time?" Tira asked. 5 minutes, he replied. Erin frowned. "We don't have 5 minutes. The patrols will double back before then." Brack growled in frustration. "Great! What now, genius?" Erin studied the barrier, then looked at the towering trees overhead. A plan formed in her mind. "Mavic, start on the turrets," she said. "Tira, you cover him. Brock and I will take the high ground." Brack snorted. "High ground? What are you talking about?" "Trust me," Theron said, already moving toward one of the massive trees. Reluctantly, Brack followed. Erin climbed with practiced ease, her movements fluid and efficient. Brack, despite his size, managed to keep up, though not without grumbling under his breath. From their vantage point, they could see the entire base layout, including the power generator for the barrier. "See that?" Erin pointed to a small access hatch on the generator. "If we disable that, the barrier goes down. Think you can make the jump?" There was a tiny beep on the headset, and Erin saw Jack raise his eyebrow. Brack's eyes narrowed. "You're insane." "Good thing insanity runs in Deathworlders," she said with a grin. Without waiting for a response, Erin leapt from the tree, landing with precision on a branch closer to the generator. Brock hesitated for a moment, then followed, his larger frame causing the branch to creak ominously. Together, they reached the generator. Just as Mavic finished disabling the turrets, Erin pried open the access hatch, exposing a mess of wires and circuits. She worked quickly, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who had dismantled and reassembled machinery 100 times before. "Hurry up," Brack muttered, keeping watch for any sign of approaching guards. "Almost there," Erin said, twisting a final wire into place. The barrier flickered, then powered down. "Move!" Erin shouted, dropping to the ground. The squad regrouped and slipped through the opening in the perimeter. Inside the base, chaos erupted as alarms blared. The enemy forces had discovered the breach and reinforcements were closing in. Erin led the charge through the narrow corridors, using her knowledge of the base layout to guide them toward the command center. Brack took point, his sheer size and strength clearing a path through enemy combatants, while Tira's agility allowed her to strike with precision. Mavic stayed in the rear, his technical skills proving invaluable as he hacked doors and disabled security systems on the fly. When they reached the command center, Erin didn't hesitate. She moved to the central console and began downloading the intelligence files, her eyes scanning the screen for any useful data. "We've got company," Brack shouted, positioning himself near the entrance as enemy forces closed in. "Hold them off," Erin said without looking up. Tira and Brack fought side by side, their contrasting styles creating a seamless defense. Mavic fired his sidearm nervously, managing to take down a few enemies despite his obvious discomfort with combat. The download completed just as the squad's defenses began to falter. "Time to go," Heron called, grabbing the data drive and sprinting toward the exit. The squad fought their way out of the base, retreating into the jungle as enemy reinforcements gave chase. Aaron led them through a series of narrow pathways and hidden trails, using the terrain to their advantage. By the time they reached the extraction point, the enemy forces had been left far behind. As the simulation ended, the environment dissolved into grids of holographic light. The squad stood in the now empty chamber, breathing heavily but triumphant. Drake turned to Aaron, his expression unreadable. "Not bad," he said grudgingly. Aaron smirked. "High praise coming from you." Tira chuckled, her tail flicking in amusement. You might not be so bad after all." Mavic collapsed onto the floor, his feathers ruffling in exhaustion. "Next time, let's pick a mission that doesn't involve so much running." Aaron laughed, the sound genuine for the first time in days. Outside the chamber, Grix and Lyrics watched from the observation deck, their expressions conflicted. "She's not just a recruit," Grix said finally. "She's a force of nature." Lyra nodded. "And if we're smart, we'll make sure she's on our side."